Good afternoon. We'll reconvene now at 5:05 for our public hearing. Item number 1. Amanda?
Good evening, Commissioners. Amanda Swindle with the County Attorney's Office. I have the pleasure of doing your 5 o'clock public hearing today. It has been legally noticed. This is a hearing to adopt amendments to the Land Development Code that have been directed by the board back in January. This package of amendments includes addressing state preemption regarding single and two-family design standards, the addition of the casitas as a permissible accessory structure within recreational vehicle plan developments, the introduction of the hybrid warehouse concept as a use within the Land Development Code, as well as adding some uses within plan developments that were directed by this board separately. Staff is here if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this time? Okay. Questions? Okay. Any public comment on this public hearing item? Good evening, Alexis.
Good evening. Alexis Crespo with RVI Planning and Landscape Architecture. I'm joined here tonight by Dwayne Truitt, who is the developer of the Laguna Caribe at Cypress Woods RV Park. I'm here to speak about the casita aspect of this amendment. I want to start by thanking wonderful staff, their hard work putting this all together, and working with RV developers to get some good language in place to allow for these casitas, which is a unit that's going to allow for kitchen, cooking facilities within the accessory dwelling or accessory structure on an RV lot. And this is just going to bring us up to the very high-end standards that you're seeing in RV parks across the country, and Collier County allows for these types of uses, so we're glad to see Lee County adopting standards so we can be competitive. We would ask the board to adopt the EROC version of the amendment and follow their recommendation. The one difference between what EROC adopted and what staff is recommending is that there's no limitation on the size of the casita, is how EROC recommended this be approved. Staff's version does have a 900 square foot limitation. Dwayne's here to talk about kind of the market aspects of that. From a planning standpoint, we would submit that every planned development, which is the only zoning district that this can occur within an RVPD, it's going to have max lot coverages, it's going to have a maximum building height standard, minimum setbacks required. Therefore, there are controls in place to ensure that these casita structures don't overtake the lot or aren't out of scale with that RV lot. And we'd also note that other residential uses throughout your code don't have these types of square footage limitations, so it would be somewhat rare within your code. With that, I'm happy to invite Dwayne Truitt up to discuss the market aspects of this.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Dwayne Truitt. I'm the developer for the Laguna Caribe project. I suspect you fellows may remember me from December 2020 when I put a little fly in the ointment in terms of considering our zoning resolution at the time, and that's what really started the process to develop these amendments. Like Alexis, I want to thank staff for their hard work on this amendment, and it's much appreciated. The one recommendation that does differ is the EROC recommendation, which followed our proposal to all three committees, that there not be a size limitation on the casita in the actual land development code, but rather reserve that for the planned development process. And our reasoning for that is because if you put something in the code, it becomes concrete. It becomes something that's there, and we don't change the code very often. And it's typically decades between significant changes in how the code is structured. I noticed in reviewing the staff's rationale for providing the size limitation that they said, well, this is going to confuse the issue of which is the principal use and which is the accessory use. And I think what I wanted to point out is that this is an evolving product for an evolving marketplace. 20 years ago, if casitas existed at all, they were a couple 300 square feet, that was it. It was basically a glorified storage area. Now we've got competitors in RV resorts throughout the state of Florida that we're competing against right now. They're building casitas of upwards of close to 2,000 square feet. And this is what the market wants. And it's much larger than it used to be. to put that in the code would make it very difficult to respond to those kinds of market changes. And besides, we think Lee County should be as competitive as any other county in the state of Florida when it comes to promoting quality development as this is. And finally, I would just say that the issue of the accessory use versus principal with RV resorts with casitas, they're one and the same. I mean, there really isn't a differentiating. They're a hybrid use of the property. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? This item? We'll come back to the board for any discussion or questions. If we have any questions for staff, I had a couple of questions. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, if I may, I'll just ask, if our staff would kind of weigh in on the limitation on the square footage.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dave Loveland, Community Development. Well, I would note that the comment that there aren't size restrictions for other uses in our code isn't quite true, because we do limit accessory structures in some cases. They're not supposed to be bigger than the primary structure. I would also note that EROC suggested not having a size limitation. The other two committees both agreed with the idea of a size limitation. In fact, the original staff recommendation was 600 square feet. I believe it was the LDCAC recommended going to 900 square feet, but they still felt a limitation was a good idea. The idea of unlimited size, I think it does confuse what the accessory use is and what the primary use is, and just relying on setbacks and height restrictions and those kind of things. People always build to the maximum that they can, or frequently do. So we stand by the recommendation that there should be some limitation, recognizing this as an accessory use to the recreational vehicle primary use.
I had a question. Are you done, Commissioner Hammond?
Well, I mean, I guess the only other question that comes to mind is just what would be the concern? I guess I'm just trying to think through it out loud. You know, what would be the concern if it was a 2,000 square foot casita? Like, is the concern that somebody would sleep in there overnight? And then even if they did, so what? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out what's the concern.
Well, I mean, the casita use would allow for sleeping compared to the cabana use that was previously allowed, and it allows the full kitchen. But yeah, the concern is that somehow the structure becomes the primary use. It's a residence that you just happen to park your RV at. It's not an accessory use to the RV and the RV park concept. It becomes, I guess, the main point.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
So on that note, my question is, so we're on the current code, it'd be 900 square feet is what it'd be limited to, and they're asking for unlimited. I know originally staff was looking at 600 feet, I believe,
Correct.
Which is the size of a hotel room. So 900 feet is more living accessible. Are we worried about if we go too big, it would become like a single family home? Are we worried about as far as the comp plan, as far as the amount of dwelling units per acre? Are we concerned about that? And what would constitute that threshold? Would it be 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet? I mean, if it's living quarters with the restrooms, kitchen, and a bedroom, if it's 900 feet or 1,200 feet, does that, what's the threshold where your staff would feel comfortable where we can enlarge it, would be competitive on the market for compatibility from other areas like 1,200 square feet, 1,500 square feet? Not, if you did open unlimited, it could be a 5,000 foot house basically with a motorhome parked on the outside. But realistically, and my next question is, what is currently going on in our area around us with Collier, Charlotte, surrounding counties? What are they limiting to square footage? Do we know? Anthony, do you know? Because I know Mr. Pruitt referred to the market, what the current market's looking for. I'm just curious, is that just in one area of the state of Florida? Is it statewide, what that market's driving that?
Sure. So in conducting the research, for the record, Anthony Rodriguez, zoning manager with community development, in conducting the research and preparing these amendments, we considered a couple of things. One, we considered past approvals and RVPDs within Lee County and limitations on cabana uses, which is analogous but not identical to the casita use. We also looked into surrounding jurisdictions, Cape Coral, Hendry County, which was referenced by Mr. Truitt as we moved through this process, and also Collier County. Anything we found supported that 600 to 800 square foot limitation. Now, I want to just caveat that with that research began about a year ago, and things obviously change over time. So regulations may have changed. With respect to Hendry County in particular, there is no square footage limitation on casitas. However, what was required by that Hendry County development was the need to establish homeowners association covenants, deed restrictions. Those are all reviewed, those casita type uses are all reviewed through that homeowners association. And so they have some regulatory authority in terms of how small or how big those structures can be.
So, Dave, my original question, what would be, as far as I know we're at 900 square feet now, compatible where it would not be an issue with dwelling units based upon the current comp plan, the use of the property, setbacks, 1,200 feet, 1,500 feet, if we adjusted that based upon be more competitive without putting an open-ended on it, or would it, or your staff going to stick with the 900 square feet?
As an accessory unit, I think we're comfortable with the 900 square feet. I don't know that we have a specific square footage size where it trips over to being more of a single-family home, but I would say I don't think people build single-family homes much smaller than about 1,200 square feet anymore. So.
Yeah, I'm just looking at for the future as the market changes and it would be more competitive for this market. Do we need to look at 1,200 to 1,500 square feet where it's not open-ended, where you can just put a 5,000 square foot building on a lot that's not made for that with setbacks, but you know it could be accessible and compatible with the surrounding areas. Because we all know if you add more square footage on higher roof lines, so it's going to change the appearance of the community, this community, if you add square footage. So I'm okay with adding some more square footage. I'm not sure about the open end, but I'm waiting to hear from my colleagues. So. Anybody else have any questions or discussion?
Well, I should have pulled it up before this, my bad, I was working on something else, but I went to one about a year ago, and it was built around a lake. It was a beautiful community, which was standard. So you had the pad for your RV, and there was limitations on how New York, could be any, I think, older than 5 years. Had a fire pit, and then it had the casita. Casita had beautiful kitchen, one-car garage. I mean, it was pretty amazing, and I've got pictures. I can't find it right now. But there was some flexibility in the square footage that they had, in that if they had a screen portion of that, it didn't count as part of the enclosure. So there was some flexibility in that. The thing that it was consistent, and they had the casitas of different sizes, so on and so forth. And then they had a clubhouse, so people would gather for lunch in there, and so it was really a pretty cool deal, not inexpensive. It was pretty nicely done. My concern would be, and I don't know if the community itself, if this law said you can go up to 2,000 feet as a number, who controls then the size within that development? Is it the law that we pass here, or is it the community that says you can't build it any more than X?
Well, it would be governed by the law that we have in terms of what we would enforce. The community, through its association, whoever runs it, could have their own covenants and requirements. And in fact, what you just mentioned about the screen porch area, that was part of the change when the committee was reviewing and suggested an increase to 900 square feet. They made clear that that should be considered living area under air, so that screen porch areas and things like that wouldn't count toward that square footage.
Right. And the other thing was, the concern was you couldn't sleep in the casita. Now, there was a nice sofa there, which I guess would probably pull out and stuff like this. I could have slept there. But that was not a part of the community rules. You had to sleep in your RV, which was more than probably my house. That was okay.
With the new changes, you'd be able to, with this decision, with either 900 feet or how much size it is.
So based on what I saw, and I don't have the, I think the increase in size probably has merit. Being open-ended, I'd have some concerns.
I'm probably in the same place you are, Cecil. Mr. Chairman, I am trying to think of an appropriate size 900 seems limited, and I'm not looking to do that. We seem to evolve as a community. I mean, I just was at an event on Friday at these man caves, and I didn't even know they existed 5 years ago, and there's such a demand for them. So I want to make sure we're competitive, and I want to make sure that we offer the amenities necessary for people to maximize their ability. So 900 seems limited.
Right. And for example, the man cave situation, if you had limited on space, it wouldn't look like the ones you saw last week probably, if you had limitations on space.
Correct.
Market drives the space because how they going to pay for square footage. So.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, one point I wanted to make is that there would be an opportunity through the PD process, because this is only going to apply to plan development, or recreational vehicle plan developments. They could ask for deviations from the size requirement too, if they thought that was appropriate for whatever the product was they were doing. And you don't have to make the final decision tonight, since this is the first of two public hearings. So you could, move it along to the second public hearing, ask us to take a look at some additional things if you want us to do that before the next hearing. The next one will be May 17th, I believe.
So you heard the staff. I was going to second or support a motion if it included increased space, square footage, either 1,200 or 1,500, but the motion maker can make a motion and include some type of language we can discuss at the next hearing.
I'm gonna support whatever motion's made. I just wanted to kind of just put out there where my head's at. Just kind of getting back to our principles and kind of where we think about what government's role is in all this. I'm actually okay with it being unlimited and letting the market decide what they want to support and what they don't want to support. Because I'm trying to think of, it's not a life safety issue. No one's going to die if this thing's 2,000 square feet or smaller or larger than that. I mean, I don't even know that if it's a compatibility issue. Again, they're going to sleep there, whether they're sleeping in their RV or sleeping in the casita, and so it doesn't matter if it's 900 or 2,000 or 5,000. I'm just trying to really think of how would I explain to somebody in the public why I thought this limit, whatever square footage it is the right one? I don't know that I could. So, I mean, I'm actually okay with an unlimited and letting the person who owns the property decide. But that's just where I'm at, and figured I'd contribute that to the conversation.
I mean, listen, I'm struggling with exactly what you're referring to. I mean, we just have evolved as a community. We evolved in so many different aspects, and this is just one where we're arbitrarily picking a number or throwing a dart and saying, okay, it's 900, it's 1,200. And I have some hesitation because I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to say there's a limitation. To your point, I'm a free market person. I've been free market for 30 years. I don't really want to put a limitation.
So how do we then differentiate between a casita and an ancillary service and just a regular house?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, so I was wondering, is there a length of stay restriction on that? Are they only allowed to rent this lot with this unit for a certain number of days? Is that part of the deal here?
Well, there's a distinction in our code between transitory and non-transitory parks. So if they're transitory, I think they're limited to 6 months. If it's non-transitory, they can stay unlimited amount of time. The only other restriction is that the house couldn't be occupied without having the RV there.
So that would be the one key differentiation then between a house and the RV would have to be there.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my concerns were, as far as I understand I want to have the free market and let the market drive this. They're not going to build something, they're not going to buy it, it's not going to be used. My concern is when you get bigger, are we going to go up? Would that be limited to only 1 story, 2 story? And when we're referring to compatibility as far as the surrounding neighborhoods, if heights, obviously 45 feet, but is there going to be look differently from the outside looking in this community? Now, I know it's going to be a more expensive community if you have a 2,000 square foot unit compared to 900 square foot. So we know it's going to be a higher property value. It's going to be good for the community around it. But my concern was, if you increase square footage, would they be able to go up with 2 stories? That would change the appearance of the community also from the outside. Would that be limited to only 1 story?
No.
I don't know if the 2-story would be part of a market thing, they would probably, but if you want 3,000 to 4,000 square foot, would they want to go higher just for the lot setbacks to get the square footage?
That would be a possibility.
Yeah. So that was my concern about compatibility. If it's in a small area, I'm just picturing an area, say 20 acres by the beach or something where you have surrounding neighborhoods, how that appearance is going to look from the outside. But I would support, obviously moving forward with we can discuss at the next hearing. either open-ended or some other footage. Whatever the motion maker likes to include that.
So, what I'd like to do is obviously keep the blank for the square footage. So I'd like us to move to the next public hearing. We could fill in the blank, whether it's unlimited or whether it's 12 or 1,500, but I'd like to move forward with this. And we can certainly come to a resolution at our next meeting on what that appropriate square feet would be. That was my motion.
What's your motion?
Second.
We have a second? Any other discussion? Any objections? No objection, motion carries.
Thank you.